Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 26th and tonight's movie is The Sacrament. This is a 2013 found footage movie directed by Ty West, who was the same person who directed The House of the Devil from the first Horror Nights. That's a movie I didn't really like. It was boring, but it was very interesting in its style and aesthetic. This movie is based off of the Jonestown Massacre. For those of you who don't know, Jim Jones was a charlatan preacher in the 1970s who created the Jones Temple and moved him and a bunch of his congregants to Guyana in order to make a settlement, Jonestown. He actually detested Christianity and was preaching more socialist values, and there were human rights violations in Jonestown. And when reporters came and discovered that things were not very good, even though they were going to give a positive review of it when they came back, he saw it as all was being lost. So he made everybody in his congregation drink poisoned Flavor Aid drink and dying. That's where the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid comes from. Jim Jones shot himself not long after. Okay, history lesson over. This is basically that, but it's modernized. I believe it takes place in 2013 when the movie was released. And this one, I think that the settlement is called Eden Parish, and they refer to the Jim Jones character as just Father. It's kind of weird to make a movie so closely based off of a real historical event like this, because a lot of people know how the real story ended. So are they going to do the same ending, or are they going to try something different? I don't know. I guess the only way to find out is to watch, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, I get the feeling that this episode is going to be a little bit shorter than the other ones. This is going to be like the Goodnight Mommy review, where there's going to be no non-spoiler spoiler section, because unbeknownst to me, I basically spoiled the entire movie already just by telling you what happened in the Jonestown Massacre. This movie seems to go beat for beat for what happened in history. It seems to, but they leave some stuff out, and I'm gonna have to give this movie a negative review. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. In a vacuum, just by itself, there's nothing really bad about it. I mean, it's kind of slow-paced, but just as a concept, I don't like it. This movie is very, very closely based on what happened in reality with Jonestown. They just changed around some names. I don't know why they didn't just make a mockumentary about Jonestown instead of coming up with their new things. Maybe they couldn't get the rights or something like that. But, I mean, fine. You can't make it directly about the event. But they followed everything so closely that it makes the things that they chose to omit a little bit more striking and glaring. Things that they chose to omit. In this movie, they say communism and communist and socialist, a grand total, I think, one time each in the same sentence. It was, you can call me communist or socialist or whatever you people like to call people who want to help their fellow man, which is a horrible straw man, by the way, but that's come to be expected from Father in this movie. He is a manipulator. There is some political ideology in the cult that was described in this movie, but not as much as it was in real life. In real life, communism and socialism was made into the dogma. It was part of the religion. I actually got it wrong in the first part of this video. It was called the People's Temple. And I do have political biases on this subject, but just from a historical accuracy standpoint, they made the conscious choice to leave such a huge part of the People's Temple and what it was about just completely out of this remaking of events. Instead, they made it seem like a very extremist version of Christianity. And Father, even though he is clearly crazy in this movie, the last words he says before he shoots himself is, "I believe God take me." So it at least gives off the impression that he wasn't a phony preacher the way that Jim Jones was in real life. So again, if they were going to make everything else so close, they had the same thing with the helicopters shooting down the reporters. They had the same thing with the Kool-Aid being poisoned and all of them drinking that. They had the same thing for Father shooting himself in the face when all that was over. They got everything else so close, but they left out these two very specific things that sort of, defined what this whole cult was about. And I just have to ask, why? What was the end goal with this? I'm not accusing Ty West of trying to rewrite history with this fictitious movie based on real events, but it really does come off like there was a political agenda to this movie. The Sacrament would have fared so much better if it either was completely not based on historical events and they actually did their own thing by creating that own extremist religious cult and something like that, or if they had actually tried to make it a mockumentary of the actual events of the Jonestown Massacre. This movie tries to have its cake and eat it too when it comes to being based off of a true story. That is something I don't think I can look past when it comes to this movie. There are some decent things in it. I like how they showed, like, the people in this cult, like, the, father, he comes off as very manipulative and very, like, sort of, like, Machiavellian. He, like, there was a point where he was being interviewed, and he had the entire room wrapped around his finger the entire time. When he was asked a question, he would turn to face the audience and then talk to them. Whenever anything came up that he didn't want to talk about, he would spin it immediately. It was a good glimpse into how he was able to create such loyal followers. And it also drove home the fact that even though the cult leader is bad, the cultists themselves were not bad people. They seemed very nice and friendly. They were just people who felt like down on their luck and like abandoned by the rest of the world. But the base choices that they made when it comes to the screenplay and plot of this movie is something that just doesn't sit well with me. As an art piece, I guess I can respect it a little bit, but as a based on a true story movie, I don't like it. And there really isn't that much else to say. I told you that this video was going to be short. I'll see you guys tomorrow.